The champs are here. The Florida Panthers are back after winning the Stanley Cup in 2024, returning just about all of their key players and looking to repeat. Is there anything that can stop them other than themselves?
I admit it. Last year was rough.
What do you need to know about the Florida Panthers? They won the freaking Stanley Cup. In the regular season, they weren't exactly world beaters, but they were very good, winning the Atlantic Division with 110 points and 52 games, the second best team in the East. In the first round, in a rematch of the Battle of Florida, state team asserted their dominance once again, winning the series in just 5 games. In the second round, another rematch of the previous year, facing off against the Boston Bruins, which once again the Panthers managed to win. In 6, setting up a matchup with the best team in the East, the New York Rangers. It was a battle of the goaltenders, as 5 of the 6 games featured the teams combining for 5 or fewer goals. And ultimately, it was the Panthers who came out on top, winning the series and advancing to the Stanley Cup Finals for the second straight year. And while the year before they fell to the Vegas Golden Knights, in this year, the Florida Panthers came out and looked like a team that was ready to finish the job. They won their first 3 games, including 1 game on the road, which set them up 3-0 in the series and made it an almost certainty that they would win. But then things started to get a little hairy. The Oilers put up 8 on them in game 4, and then 5 in the next 2 games. They were worried that Bobrovsky was coming down off of his playoff high as they went into one final game, a game 7, to avoid a reverse sweep. And avoid it they did in a tight checking, fiercely contested battle that went down to the wire. Bobrovsky was the difference as he held the Oilers to just 1 goal, and Sam Reinhart scored the eventual winner in the 3rd period, giving the Florida Panthers the franchise's first ever Stanley Cup. Paul Maurice is a veteran coach who's been around the block for years. He's been with a bunch of different organizations, and he came ever so close to winning the Stanley Cup before last year, finally securing one. With that monkey off of his back, you have to figure that Maurice is going to be here in Florida for the long term, at least the next 3 to 5 years, unless he decides he wants to retire or call it quits early. But Maurice has proven to be an extremely good head coach, particularly on the tactical side of things. He knows how to deploy his players, he knows how to get them up for games, and he knows how to get the most out of a team that may not necessarily be the most talented in the NHL, which is why he's one of the elite head coaches in the league.
You're a star, you're on top. Somebody bring you some hair.
You should kill yourself.
You could probably name 3 or 4 players in Florida who are their best player, and I wouldn't argue with you. Matthew Tkachuk is certainly one, Sergei Bobrovsky is another, but I'm going to put their defensive ace and captain Alexander Barkov on the spot as the best player in the Florida Panthers organization. This guy has been the heart and soul of the Florida Panthers for so many years. He's a defensive ace, just winning his 2nd Selke last year. Still in his prime at age 29, he put up 80 points, but has also proven in the past that he has the offensive upside to hit 95. He's perhaps the best, most well-rounded player in the NHL right now, and he's going to be leading Florida for quite a while.
Oh, this guy again.
Barkov will be centering 2 other veteran players who were key contributors on last year's Stanley Cup winner. Carter Verhaeghe is a consistent 20-30 goal guy who always seems to score in the clutch, while Sam Reinhart is one of those Buffalo Sabres reclamation projects who's finally developed now that he's outside the shackles of that organization, putting up his first 90-point season last year. That spectacular play, including 57 goals, leading to him getting an 8-year extension to stay in Sunrise. The second line, also similarly loaded. Sam Bennett is the anchor between the hard-nosed and high-scoring Matthew Tkachuk and the smooth-skating Evan Rodriguez. But the skill doesn't stop there, as on the third line, they have Anton Lundell between Ito Luostarinen and Maki Samoskevich. All of them very versatile players on the third line, solid defensively, but all with offensive upside. Lundell last year, 13 goals and 35 points as a 22-year-old, while Luostarinen put up 43 points 2 years ago. Samoskevich is the young gun at only 21 years old, about to turn 22, and hasn't played a full NHL season yet, so it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first big look at NHL action. And finally, on the fourth line, Jesper Boquist will be between AJ Greer and Patrick Giles. Greer is a very solid fourth liner. He's been effective in Boston, while the 24-year-old Giles is an unknown seeking his first NHL action. The back end is where Florida lost most of their talent, namely Brandon Montour in the offseason, but they still have Gustav Forsling, one of the better offensive defensemen in the NHL, and Aaron Ekblad, an extremely good defenseman when he's healthy, which has been basically never for the past few years. Nico Mikkola and Adam Boquist on the second pairing is a disaster disaster waiting to happen, as the best trait that both of those defensemen provide is upside, which is not what you want on a team that's defending a Stanley Cup championship, while the third pairing features newly acquired Nate Schmidt and Dmitry Kulikov. Kulikov's a decent defensive defenseman, and they also have Uwe Smolinskis behind him, but I would probably go with Kulikov and Schmidt, as they're both much more established. In goal, Bob's back on the case. Sergei Bobrovsky returns to Florida after carrying them through the playoffs the last few years. Bob's always been an incredible playoff performer. His big problem has been in the regular season. He's been wildly inconsistent, but last year was a solid year for him, a .915 save percentage and a GAA under 2.5. Hopefully he continues that form this year, but if he doesn't, at least they can go to Spencer Knight, who is still tricking Florida Panthers fans into believing his potential warrants him having a backup role on the team.
Oh, Britta's in this?
Like I said, the Panthers didn't really make any big additions in the offseason, and the ones they did were on the back end. Adding Nate Schmidt and Adam Bokas to the back end are solid additions to offset the loss of Brandon Montour, and I really like Nate Schmidt. He's another one of those underrated puck-moving defensemen that teams seem to always overlook in free agency. Boquist is fine. I mean, he's not been great, but he's been playing in Columbus, so that can always depress a player's efficiency. The two certainly fill out the depth of the Panthers' defense, but they're still very top-heavy in that department.
That's not bad.
Gustav Forsling is one of the more controversial defensemen in the NHL. I know when the NHL did their player rankings, Forsling was rated very high, higher than a lot of other people think. And while I think that's fair to say that he's a little bit highly ranked based on a limited sample size of productivity, but to me, he's one of the better puck-moving defensemen who also plays a shutdown role very effectively, and he's definitely one of the 15 to 20 best defensemen in the NHL. Ironically, he's one of those guys who's kind of been seen so much as overrated that I think he's actually a bit underrated.
The Gambletron 2000 says the winner is Cincinnati by 200 points. Why, you worthless hunk of junk?
Last year, I made the biggest boo-boo of boo-boos, and I picked the Florida Panthers to miss the playoffs. They clearly did not do that, so I will be saying that they're making the playoffs this year. However, I don't think that they're going back-to-back to win the Cup. I think Bobrovsky is too inconsistent, and he's older. Their defense is just massively top-heavy, and I don't love a lot of their offensive depth. Their high-end talent on both the forward core and the defensive core, very, very good. But I worry that they are maybe one or two key injuries away from becoming a wildcard team in a very, very tough Atlantic division. It is going to be a dogfight, and they're certainly close to the Leafs, Lightning, and Bruins. But of those four teams, I think they're very solidly third or fourth behind both Boston and Toronto, especially now that Boston has Swayman locked up.
2 words, Nick Cousins. Guy throws dirty hits from behind and then proceeds to refuse to fight, instead curling up into a ball and dropping to the ice like a sack of potatoes. What a coward.
Panthers trading Montour, Lomberg, Larson, Lawrence, Cousins, and Stenlund was pathetic moves by Bill Zito.
They are perfect. Can't wait to hear people complain about Florida's no state income tax.